Hello everybody, this is a special guide about Hwang that I haven't seen too much of it. People haven't talked about it yet. I don't know if people have found it. I don't know if they haven't. This is my findings on the character. I got around to finally playing him, and you notice that one special thing about Hwang, it's not only just his talismans, but he's got a resource of sorts. If you look below his health bar, he's got a yin-yang symbol and a number. That number and that symbol is what is considered to be his life force. You expend life force to perform specific attacks, namely summoning the various talismans, specific attacks that drain him, even with chain commands. These numbers can range from -9 to +9, and performing specific actions will either increase or reduce the number of his life force. Messing around in training mode, I found out that there's specific ways that you can actually increase him without the obvious means of using Iron Will. This is going to be the most obvious go-to one because, as explained in his command settings, performing specific commands with Iron Will activated, realistically any aura activated, will grant him an increase in life force. There are ways outside of Iron Will that I've happened to notice that allows you to increase it, and I'm about to go over them, but I'm going to first talk about the various stances. The beginner-friendly aura, well, let me talk about how to get into him first. To get into his various auras, you press the A plus K in a specific direction. Pressing down takes him into the Resolve stance. Pressing forward takes him into the Devastation stance. Pressing up takes him into the Might stance. And to get into the Iron Will, you have to be soul charged and use the stance and back. One thing to note is that performing the Iron Will stance will cancel all remaining soul charge for Hwang. I'm going to go over Resolve stance real quick. Upon going into Resolve, you notice that Hwang has a green aura around him. He's got a green symbol underneath his health bar, and you'll notice that his standard activation is 1 life force. I'll reset. Activating it costs 1 life force. Now Hwang has specific attacks that grant bonuses depending on which stance you are in. In the Resolve case, by performing specific attacks, I'm going to reduce his health real quick to show you. He restores health. Different attacks restore different amounts of health. Typically with these various attacks, the more cost, the longer the activation period, the more health that is restored. If I can do it right. Going a little excessive there, but you get the idea. And this is true across all stances. In Resolve, you restore health. That's obvious. It costs 1 to activate. However, there's something that's a little different about the activation. Would you believe me if I told you that you could, upon activating, refund the cost of activating the Resolve stance? It's a very specific situation. It's fairly easy to get into, and it's pretty self-explanatory. What you'll notice, well, to get into that, your health has to be considered low, 30% or less. I'm going to activate the Resolve stance now. Notice that his life force count still remains at 4. I'm going to do it again. We'll reset, low health. His life force count remains at 4 despite the normal activation cost being 1. This is where things get interesting. This tells you that under a specific circumstance, in this case for having low health or even less, you can realistically have 1 health between 1 and 30%. That activation effect will occur. However, you think, oh, this is great. One thing you cannot do, though, is while in Resolve, activate Resolve again. This is true across all auras. I'm going to mention it now, but I'm also going to talk about it in each aura as I go. Activating the same aura over and over again, even though you meet specific requirements, will not give you the refund. In this particular, for Resolve, you can gain 1 life force just by activating it when you're at low health. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. The other way that you can automatically gain gain life force is actually by this means. That was terrible. I'm gonna try that again. When Hwang is in Resolve stance like he is now, and he is in low health state, he will gain 1 Resolve. By activating it negates the cost. What this is going to do, that makes it that simple. I'm having issues again. Sorry, let me just do one thing, because I've been having issues with this. Alright, I'm in Resolve stance. At low health, we know that it refunds the cost. But, did you know that if you go into low health while you're in Resolve, you'll automatically gain 1 Resolve? That's where things start to get interesting. Oop, that's gonna work. And that's gonna reset every time I try and do something. But basically the idea is if you're in low health and you activate Resolve, you're going to refund the cost of the Resolve by 1 point. If you are in Resolve state and you go into low health state, take just a second. Keep in mind, right now he's got 3. As he enters low health state, he gains 4. I'm not able to really accurately show off this next thing just because... No, actually, I think I can. Okay, I can do this. Alright. I'm in Resolve. I'm still in that first Resolve state. What I can do, you see I'm still at 3. Anytime, and this is the same aura as activated before. Anytime Hwang goes into a low health state while the Resolve is in effect, terrible. Well, anyway, anytime he goes into low health state while Resolve is in effect, he will automatically gain 1 life force. That's more or less it. If you're at low health, activate it, you'll be in Resolve stance where your specific attacks will restore health. If you go into low state while Resolve is active, you'll gain 1 life force. Resolve, it's pretty simple. Next stance I'm going to talk about is Devastation. This is a stance that is specific to Soul Charge and Soul Gauge. Anytime that you are in this stance and you hit with the specific attacks, you restore significant quantities of Soul Gauge. Meanwhile, if your opponent, if your opponent is in their Soul Charge state, and you hit them while in Devastation, it reduces their total amount of time in their Soul Charge state. At the same time, you're increasing your Soul Gauge. This is where things get interesting, and if you were paying attention to the Life Force just a second ago, you will have noticed it. I wasn't having issues with this earlier, but recording seems to be a bit of an issue for me right now. Yeah, for some reason I'm suddenly having recording issues. So what I'm gonna kind of try and go around this as best I can. Gauge tax, percentage. No, I want this. Devastation. Yeah, I want this.
Devastation! Devastation!
Hwang's in Devastation. I'm gonna demonstrate using the AI. This is where things... Yeah, I've already said that a million times, but I'm gonna say it again. This is the soul charge, soul gauge form. It's good against soul gauge, against soul charge. It's good for building soul charge. What it doesn't tell you is that you can gain life force while in the devastation state. And it's pretty simple. The first case,
No, my true strength!
if I can do it right.
My soul burn with purpose!
Well, I am screwing this up royally.
Devastation!
Actually, no, that's perfect right there.
Devastation! Devastation!
What can happen
My soul
if your
burn
opponent
with purpose!
is in a soul charge state?
Devastation!
What you want to do is activate Devastation.
Devastation!
This is so hard to do without being able to record. I don't know why I can't record all of a sudden. I don't have a second controller to do this with. But pretty much the idea is anytime your opponent is in soul charge state, if you activate the Devastation aura,
Devastation!
what's going to happen is you will actually gain life force from it. And kind of like Resolve, this is the same deal, except that the big thing about this is it's dependent on your opponent being in soul charge state. If I'm in soul charge state and I try and use Devastation, it'll cost a regular point. It just doesn't work. If your opponent is in a soul charge state, this is really difficult without having what I need.
Demon's Bane!
There we go, I can do that. He's in soul charge state. That's not at all what I wanted.
Demon's Bane!
If your opponent is in a soul charge state, activate Devastation. It'll cost 1 life force and refund 2, so you're going to actually gain 1. So, that's pretty good, right? What if
Demon's Bane!
your opponent goes, oh boy. Your opponent, what if your opponent activates their soul charge while you are in Devastation?
Demon's Bane!
You're going to gain 2 life force. It's really that simple. It's kind of silly. So the idea behind this is that if you think your opponent is going to go into a soul charge state, activate Devastation and just kind of wait it out. If they're already in a soul charge state, and let's say you have enough time, you're way back away, activate it, and you'll get your refund. Pretty neat. That's about it. I wrote down notes for it, but that's really more or less it. Next up, we're going to go into Might. This one is probably going to be, depending on your play style, the least used stance.
Might!
Because it's good, but it's, like I said, depending on your play style, you will or will not benefit from this. it's good to know about it, but you may or may not benefit. Because if you like to play a rushdown character, or I mean a rushdown style with Hwang where you're not guarding a whole lot, then this doesn't really matter too much. But what this is Might is a defensive, but it's not the defensive that you would think it is. Might is tied to your guard gauge. And what do I mean by that? More specifically, your guard crush percentage. Like you'll see, it's if I'm at 0%, nothing happens, but as soon as you go to low guard, you're gonna gain points. If you're already at a low guard and you activate it, you're gonna gain Lifeforce. And kind of like you saw a second ago, if you are in the Might stance and then you go into the low guard state, you will automatically gain those points. It's kind of neat. So far we've got Resolve. When you're activated, when you're at low health, you'll gain Lifeforce. If you're gonna go to low health, you'll automatically gain you'll automatically gain Lifeforce. Devastation. If your opponent is in Soul Charge state, you'll gain points. If they go into Soul Charge state while you are in Devastation, then you'll gain points. Might. When your guard gauge gets low, you'll gain points. If it's already low and you activate it, you'll gain points. Finally, we've got the Iron Will. Iron Will is normally activated by consuming Soul Charge. To do it, you have to be in a Soul Charge state. You press A plus K, and then you press back. As mentioned earlier, this consumes all of your soul gauge and puts you into the Iron Will stance. This stance is unique in that the next attack is considered to be a counter hit. So for example, forward BB in the Iron Will stance is a 2-hit combo because it's considered counter. If you try and do that combo and you don't, oh shit. You know, that helps if I turn that off. It's not a 2-hit natural combo because you're not in counter. In training mode, the shortcut is A plus K and back. In a standard match, it will be while you're in soul gauge, while you have soul gauge, stance and back. The unique thing about Iron Will is that this is the only stance that, well, it's already unique in that it consumes your soul gauge. It is the only stance that performing attacks will increase your soul gauge amount. Various attacks increase different amounts. Gotta be in stance. And each one of these attacks that lets you gain Lifeforce, they all have their own set amounts. One thing to know about this is that because everything is considered a counter hit during Iron Will, these numbers don't change. So what you get is what you get. Iron Will and his guard break restores 6 points. Iron Will and forward B plus K, that restores 3 points, but at the same time it also deals a lethal hit upon successful hit. Now for real quick reference, his Divine Wing stance looks like that. Iron Will to Divine Wings BB, that grants 1 point. Iron Will stands B, hold B, full charge, restores 6 Lifeforce. There is one more actually that you can do to restore points. I'm gonna quickly wait.
Calm yourself.
go all the way to lowest possible stacks. Activate Iron Will, and you want to use his soul attack.
Demon Bane!
That will restore 9 points total. So that's basically the idea of all these stances. A couple of things to note is that even if you meet specific requirements where you would normally be refunded a point, like for example Resolve, if you try and activate... Actually, I'm just going to make everything active. Even if you meet all possible requirements, for example, Devastation, you're at low health, Might. If you try and use, I said it earlier, if you try and use the auras multiple times in a row, Might. Yeah, you're already at low guard gauge, but that particular activation cost and refund is unique to the first time in that particular situation. What that means, that particular aura, which means you have to shift to a different aura to get that benefit again. Devastation, he's in Soul Charge. It's basically, you have to meet certain requirements, but they are unique to the first time you activate them in that particular aura. If you change to a different aura, activate again, you will get your benefits back. It's really that simple. It's complicated. The whole aura situation is complicated by nature, just because it is very situational. But that's the general rundown. If when you're at low health, activate Resolve, you'll get a point. Devastation when your opponent is in Soul Charge state. Might when you are at low gauge. Iron Will pretty much when you think that you can get something out of it. Like I said before, these can be used tactically. You can, if you're low on health and you know you're going to be going in soon and you need some life force, there you go, activate it. If your opponent has a bar, maybe you just want to go into Devastation because maybe they'll go into their Soul Charge. If you're guarding a lot, you're in the yellow health, just go ahead and throw up Might. You'll probably go into low guard percentage soon. Again, Iron Will, that's going to be all on you to decide. As you guys kind of saw, there are situations where, let's say, there are situations where you can kind of infinitely gain points, but they are pretty specific. It's kind of tied to your own situation as well there. For example, Devastation, it's only good while your opponent is in a Soul Charge state. If they're rushing you down, you're not really going to have all this time to use everything. So that's more or less it. Hwang really is situational awareness, the character, keeping an eye on basically everything. Will tell you when a good idea to use your auras are, when it's a bad idea. Maybe if you're at full health, you don't want to activate Resolve. If you're at full guard gauge, then you're not going to want to be in a Might state. If your opponent has nowhere near enough bar to go into Soul Charge, don't worry about using Devastation. You just gotta keep an eye on things, plan ahead, and figure out how you want to go with the flow. Alright, that's all.